Everyone ready?
Kia ora koutou. Welcome to today's stand-up, 1 p.m. Friday the 10th of February. I'm Rachel Kelleher, the Deputy Controller for Auckland Emergency Management, and sitting out of frame, but alongside me today, I have Georgina Griffith from the Met Service, our Auckland-based meteorologist, Vaughan McKerrath, Auckland City District Manager of Fire and Emergency New Zealand, Grant Tetzloff, Acting District Commander for New Zealand Police, Stacey van der Putten, Executive General Manager Safety, Auckland Transport, and Ian McCormick, General Manager Building Consents from Auckland Council. We continue to work together with our partner agencies on ensuring that everything that can be done to prepare for Cyclone Gabrielle is being done. This includes sending the message to our communities that we need everybody to take action now to be prepared. Yesterday, Mayor Wayne Brown confirmed an extension to the declaration of the local state of emergency for the Auckland region through until next Friday. This enables authorities to respond as required, including enforcing evacuations if this is needed for people's safety. We want to remind you that the impacts of this system may differ from what we experienced recently. The addition of strong winds and storm surges will mean there are additional risks, and the impacts will compound those that are still being felt from last month's event. On that note, I'd like to take this opportunity to recognise the resilience and spirit of togetherness that has seen the Aotea Great Barrier community come together through a number of challenging events this year. Great Barrier Aotea often bears the brunt of the weather for the Auckland region, and we know the frequency of these events in the past months has been challenging. We know again that that community will stand together as we again face what could be another impactful event. I would also like to acknowledge the immense efforts of the emergency management response teams who have been working swiftly and steadily to assist Aucklanders following last month's event. We also thank those who have come together from other regions across Aotea New Zealand and to assist the response effort here in Tamaki Makaurau. We couldn't have done that without you. What we know about Cyclone Gabrielle. I'm now going to hand over to our specialist Auckland-based meteorologist, Georgina Griffith from Met Service, who will explain what we currently know and what the expected impacts are going to be. Thanks, Georgina.
Thanks, Rachel. Thank you. Okay, so there's some things I'm going to be talking about that we do know well today, and then we will readdress impacts again on Sunday. That's when we're really going to be able to refine for the Auckland region what we expect. So currently, severe tropical cyclone Gabrielle is an intense Category 3 system over the Coral Sea. As of today, Friday, this weather system is behaving. It's doing what it's expected to do in a forecast sense. However, as it tracks southeastwards out of the tropics, there does remain some uncertainty, some play in how close it gets to Auckland next Monday and Tuesday. Monday and Tuesday are the 2 days that Aucklanders should be preparing for now. Our worst case scenario would be it tracks pretty close and our impacts are quite large in magnitude, and I'll talk about them in a minute. The better scenario is that it's slightly further away, but please note that even if it's further away, Auckland should expect impacts for two reasons. One, the region is pretty vulnerable right now to further rain and wind, but two, the system is a very, very deep low when it comes near, and it's a large system. So even if it's further east or away from Auckland, we will still see impacts in the region. Okay, so wind is arguably the most important thing to note, Aucklanders. Whilst it starts to get windy on Sunday, and we have some of the watches are already issued for wind in the region, the most impactful wind event we see is later Monday and also through Tuesday. Initially, the winds are from the east and southeast, so typically that would be Aotea, Great Barrier and North Auckland seeing the most impactful wind on Monday first, and then all of the region is at risk of impactful severe gales on Tuesday morning. Now, Auckland likes to blow from the southwest. It's our common direction and we do it really well. So, you should expect some wind impact almost everywhere in Auckland. Given our saturated soils, the winds are a problem for trees, power lines and other aspects. What I could ask for Aucklanders to do is to tie down the trampoline, clear out the yard, nail down the dog. Okay. All right, the second most important variable we're concerned about with this event is, of course, rainfall. The rainfall totals for 3 days are rather large. Yes, we see some quiet rain coming in late Saturday night and other rain coming in on Sunday, but it's Monday, Tuesday that we expect the bursts of heavier rain. The rainfall totals are pretty significant even for 3 days for Aotea, Great Barrier and also North Auckland, north of about Whangaproa. So we are concerned around exacerbating existing slips. At this stage, we won't know which regions of Auckland are likely to see the most significant rain rates, so the heaviest rain, until around Sunday. So we'll brief you again on Sunday. But be prepared, basically, for reasonable levels of rainfall. 200 to 300 millimetres for Barrier and North Auckland, 1 to confused and pretty dangerous on Monday into Tuesday up there. If Cyclone Gabrielle comes west of Coromandel, so very close to Auckland, we do expect a storm surge into our eastern coastline. However, if the cyclone is further east, we should be okay from a coastal storm surge point of view here in Auckland. Just noting other regions may not fare so well. So there's a lot going on, heavy seas, swells, and a potential for a storm surge into all of our east coast on Tuesday morning if the cyclone is very close. So advice to Aucklanders, the weather is going to be impactful. What we're trying to nail down on Sunday is which regions and what peak magnitude we're looking at. Thank you.
Thanks, Georgina. It's great to see the efforts that many Aucklanders are already taking to personally prepare for the incoming weather. And now, as you've heard, is not the time to be complacent. We still have plenty of time to prepare, and we ask that people use the time wisely, but also do that calmly. The Get Ready website is a great resource for people to check out with plenty of information about how people can prepare for a storm. Think about your family members, pets and belongings. Be prepared to leave if you need to and have enough supplies to sustain yourself for up to 3 days. With the strong winds expected, we ask you to ensure that, as Georgina said, things are tied down and put away, from outdoor furniture to trampolines. It's also possible that there may be power outages. You'll appreciate that those strong winds on these sodden grounds could very quickly bring trees down, and they could block roads and bring those power lines down. So thinking ahead around how you might cook your food, making sure your cell phones are charged, those sorts of practical things. Get familiar with your local radio station frequencies and tune in for up-to-date information. And if you don't have one handy, you might like to think about a battery-powered radio. I'm now going to hand over to Vaughan from Fire and Emergency New Zealand just to talk about the preparation that FENZ is doing ahead of Sunday. Thanks, Vaughan.
Thanks, Rachel. Good afternoon, everybody. I guess just want to give us some assurance that Fire and Emergency is already in the preparation, working closely with Auckland Emergency Management. Continue having our briefings with NEMA and the Met Service, and we've actually brought in additional resources, so we're already planning with additional resources, and that's because we've learnt, I guess, from the floods of 2 weeks ago, so we're already planning on that space. What I really want to do is just exactly the same as what Rachel has done, is advice to the public is make sure that today and tomorrow that you spend the time looking around your property. Tie down trampolines. Trampolines can be terrible in the winds. Any loose things. If you're capable and able to, then have a look at your roof, clean your gutters, check on your neighbours, your whānau. It's really important to see those that are living alone. I guess when the storm actually happens, then I want you to think about 3 really important things. Is stay off the roads. If you don't need to be on the roads, then don't be on there. This reduces your risk of being trapped by flooding or by fallen trees and power lines, which you've just heard. Don't drive on the road through floodwaters. All right, it is really hard to judge the depth. All right, and I don't want to see hidden. You won't see hidden objects. And there's risk of being swept away. And we saw that in the floods last Friday. Our biggest request is, once the storm begins, please help us to get the people who need it the most. That means only call 111 if your life is at risk. For example, if you or others are trapped or need rescue, if there is a fire, if there is a landslide, if you need to evacuate and you can't get out safely by yourself. We will always prioritise those calls of life-threatening, all right? So that's something that our comm centre will do. Again, if you need additional information, you have the websites from Auckland Emergency Management. There are our FENZ websites as well that will be regularly updated. Facebooks can be found in the Waitemata, Auckland City Centre and Counties Manukau. So there are other sites, but they'll all be linked. All right, thanks, Rachel.
At this point, I'm now going to pass over to Auckland Council's General Manager of Building Consents, Ian McCormick. Ian's just going to provide an update on the work that his team's been doing and important information for those properties that have received red and yellow stickers. Thanks, Ian.
Kia ora. The Auckland Council's building inspection teams are continuing to do rapid building assessments on newly identified properties. We're also busy providing support to homeowners who have had their buildings placarded and engaging in remedial works. We're also now looking at our contingency plans just in case we need to deploy post this event. As we've heard, we're expecting more heavy rain and it's going to impact on Auckland's already saturated soils, and our geotechnical advice is this may cause new slips to form or reactivate existing slips. So we're recommending that owners and occupants remain vigilant on properties that have shown a susceptibility to slip in the past, ones which have an existing slip from the January the 27th event, or ones that are adjacent to and a similar sort of topography to a building that has a slip on it like that, or is directly above or below it. And our advice is, if your building has a red placard, stay out of it. Most of the red placards we issued involved some degree of land movement. So you're not supposed to be in those buildings, and you definitely don't want to be in one of those during this event. If it's yellow, follow the direction on the placard. And out of an abundance of caution, we would encourage you to consider moving out during this event. stay somewhere else, stay with friends or relatives. Just don't be in that building during this event, especially if there was a ground movement associated with the issue of that yellow placard, and in many cases that is the case. If you're beside a similar topography to a building that has a slip on it or has a red placard, or you're directly above it or directly below it, again, we would encourage you to be vigilant. And if you have any concerns about the stability of your house or the land in the area, we would encourage you to move out until the end of the event. We're currently contacting owners where we have contact details who are associated with properties that we have noted ground movement during our rapid building assessment program. So probably something to around 700 to 800 people. So we're contacting them at the moment. We're just highlighting this potential risk and asking them to engage in it and directing them to the information that we've now put on our website. So we encourage people to engage in that. Again, these calls are precautionary. They're not driven by any specific concerns with your particular property. This is just blanket global advice that we're providing because we know that some soils in Auckland do slip, particularly in areas where they've slipped before. Very saturated soils and more heavy rain increases the risk. In terms of danger signs, new cracking of ground around your home, muddy waters or springs opening out of the ground, a sudden loss of power and utilities, or unusual sounds and cracking. We'd encourage you to, if you're in a situation where there's been ground movement, or you're in a red placarded building and shouldn't be there, or yellow placarded building, really do encourage you to make arrangements to be somewhere else during this event. Again, just precautionary, but it's a good time to be cautious. Thank you.
And as Georgina said, we'll get more information about sort of timing and impacts on Sunday morning, but just thinking also that, you know, many people have been through quite stressful times, and that additional thought of what might be happening to their property in one of those areas that Ian's described, you know, having a better night, there may be a better night's sleep to be had being somewhere else. So just thinking about well-being as well on top of that safety aspect. I'm now going to hand over to New Zealand Police. So I have Grant Tetzlaff, Acting District Commander, and Grant will also give us an update on the activities that police have been working on and are working up to over the next couple of days. Grant.
Kia ora everyone. I'm Acting Superintendent Grant Tetzlaff, Relieving District Commander for Auckland City Police. As we head into the into the weekend and into next week, I'd like to reassure the public that the police will continue to be visible across our communities. Police will continue to respond to calls for service and will be ready to assist Auckland Emergency Management as required. Please continue to pay close attention to official announcement and heed the advice of authorities, particularly around weather warnings and travel advice. In the event of a severe weather event, our advice is to stay off the roads and stay safe at home. We are aware in recent days there has been some discussion across some communities around burglaries at previously flood-affected properties. In the past week, we have responded to burglaries in parts of East and West Auckland. In some instances, there have been arrests made for burglaries at red or yellowed properties, as well as at homes that have not been affected by flooding. Investigations are ongoing into these matters that have been reported to us. These incidents are incredibly disappointing, considering the impact these flooding events have had on those particular members of our community. Over this weather event, you can expect an increased police presence and ongoing reassurance patrols from the police. For our community, we are asking you to keep an eye on each other and your neighbours. If you spot something suspicious at a neighbour's property, please call the police as soon as you can on 111. It is important these incidents are reported to us as soon as possible so that we can investigate and hold those responsible to account. Police have also become aware of some anecdotal reports that people have been identifying themselves as Auckland Council workers. If this is something that you have experienced, I encourage people to report this through the 10-5 service. I would like to reiterate that any council representatives or representatives from any agency will be fully identifiable in uniform or with identification. If you are being approached by someone claiming they need to assess your property, don't be afraid to challenge them for identification. If you feel unsafe or something does not feel right to you, please contact the police as soon as possible. Kia ora. Thank you.
So I'm now just going to cover off, again, just in the vein of preparedness. We appreciate that many of you are looking to take whatever measures you can to prevent new or additional damage to your properties. And we know that sandbagging is one of the ways that you can potentially minimise the impacts of water damage. However, it's important to realise that it does have its limitations too. Sandbags can be used to block doorways, drains and other openings into properties to keep water out for short periods. Sandbags can also be used to divert water away from buildings, and placing plastic sheeting such as a tarpaulin in front of the sandbags does improve their effectiveness. But other things you can do to protect your property includes clearing gutters, curbs and drains, and trimming trees that might be in contact with your building. If you think that sandbags will help reduce the impact of flooding at your place, these can be, both the bags and the sand can be purchased from hardware suppliers, and Auckland Emergency Management will have a limited supply available for collection only. So 3 sandbagging stations will be open from 8 AM to 8 PM for as long as we have stocks available on Saturday and Sunday, 11th and 12th of February, at Mairangi Bay, St Heliers and Westgate. And the specific details of the locations can be found on our Auckland Emergency Management website, aem.org.nz, along with sort of the how-to guides to use them, because it is quite important that if you are going to use them, that they are used in the right way, because if not, they can be ineffective or also potentially a barrier to letting water go. They can impound water behind them. So just, again, making sure that if you're looking to use sandbags, that you do that in the right way. Please note that these supplies are limited, and we ask that you only take what you need and strongly consider whether sandbagging is a feasible option for protecting your property. Again, sandbags don't need to be used as sort of an entire wall of sandbags. Sandbags a couple of bags high usually is sufficient. And also just a reminder, if you've got vulnerable neighbours or family members who may want access to sandbags, perhaps check in and see if you can join together to collect for them as well. I'm now going to hand to Stacey van der Putten. Stacey is going to talk to us about Auckland Transport's focus over coming days and their advice to Aucklanders when moving around the network.
Thank you, Rachel. Kia ora koutou. Auckland Transport's focus right now is on making sure Aucklanders have the information they need to plan their travel accordingly in line with the latest advice. Safety is, of course, our #1 priority, and we're working very closely with our partnering agencies to make sure that translates to the travel information that we're providing Aucklanders. We urge Aucklanders, of course, to take extreme care and keep informed with the latest information as it's updated on our websites. Currently, we still have 15 roads that are closed across the region. They're updated at at.govt.nz. There's a nice, easy banner for people to be able to find. In addition to that, and based on our knowledge, we are publishing an extensive list in terms of particular areas and roads that we know are vulnerable to flooding and high winds. So we do ask Aucklanders to be prepared for road closures. Specific areas to avoid should flooding occur are the Wairau Valley, Tamaki Drive, Fanshawe Street around Victoria Park, and Fred Thomas Drive. There are many more, and as I say, we're going to be updating the website to make sure they're all very clear for everybody to find and easily accessible. The Harbour Master has also issued an alert to the boaties to check their vessels and address any issues in preparation for the arrival of the cyclone. Our public transport network remains functional and operating. Now, we do have plans in place based on the weather information in order to be able to change and adapt our services as needed. In particular, obviously, with high winds, we'll be monitoring the Auckland Harbour Bridge with our partnering agency, Waka Kotahi, the New Zealand Transport Agency, to make calls in terms of speed limits or potential closures for the bridge. In addition, we've obviously had a lot of preparation work happening, and that'll continue throughout the weekend. We've had sweeping teams as well as catch pit cleaning teams mobilised to clean and clear as many of the catch pits as possible, especially in critical areas. This is an addition, of course, to the catch pit cleaning that's being done by Healthy Waters. Our road maintenance work continues. Post the anniversary weekend events, we have over 300 people out there that are still continually trying to get these roads reopened. In addition, there's a lot of what I call preventative work that's happening for this coming weekend and beyond. So that includes sandbags, installation of bunds and polythene covers on open slip faces and above the dropouts. So doing what we can, obviously, to stabilise the infrastructure for the incoming weather events. We have people on the ground ready to respond quickly to slips and flood events, and we also have access to geotechnical and structural engineers that we can call in as necessary based on the scenarios that we have. We do encourage Aucklanders to respect any current road closures. Barriers and signage that are out across the network are there to protect you and other people, so please do respect them and what they're there for. And to reiterate, we'll be updating our information and messaging frequently. Do check at at.govt.nz on the barrier, and also do check the AT mobile device in terms of the latest public transport information. We have our teams around the clock monitoring throughout the weekend and making sure that that travel information is real time for everybody to be able to have confidence in using the transport network if necessary. Thank you.
Thanks, Stacey. So as you've heard, Auckland Council, Auckland Emergency Management and our partner agencies are all working hard to plan and prepare for Cyclone Gabrielle and prioritising keeping Aucklanders safe, as well as continuing to work on the current flood response. So I just have a little bit more information to go through before we end today's briefing. We're finalising a number of civil defence centres and evacuation shelters, and that they will be ready to receive people and their pets who may need to evacuate if that is required. The process of establishing these centres takes into account things like the resilience of that site, geographic distribution, staffing, the ability to move supplies in and out, and accessibility. The locations of these centres will be made available on the Auckland Emergency Management website as they are confirmed. Just again, please check on, when we get into a situation of potentially having severe weather, just a reminder again to please check on your neighbours, particularly those who are elderly or vulnerable. For those who live in rural and remote locations, we're asking that you take the appropriate precautions, have a plan for your stock, secure items that may be blown about, check the backup power and fuel supplies, and double check emergency drinking water supplies and feed for stock. Take care travelling on roads and check bridges and culverts for structural damage before crossing them. Moving now to waste, our New Zealand response teams, Civil Defence volunteers, New Zealand Defence Force staff and Task Force Kiwi volunteers have all been working at pace alongside our local contractors to clear flood damaged items from curbsides. The New Zealand Defence Force staff are also supporting Auckland Council staff at our waste transfer station. So far, more than 2,100 tonnes of waste has been processed across our waste transfer stations. And with the upcoming severe weather, here's what you need to know about disposing of flood damaged items. If you can, we ask that you please take your flood damaged items to the waste transfer stations. It's free to drop off waste affected material. Our teams will continue to collect flood damaged items from curbsides on Saturday. Due to the expected high winds, please do not put any more items out onto curbsides that have already been cleared. or beyond Saturday because they could cause a hazard or block drains if they get blown around. Please secure and store flood damaged items until after this weather event's passed. People can still continue to lodge requests for help, and these will be actioned after the upcoming severe weather has passed. Also, please call our contact centre on 0800 22 22 00 if flood damaged waste is a risk to your health or safety and you need help. We will be reviewing the waste management plan after the upcoming severe weather event has gone through, because of course there may be some additional impacts that we need to respond to. We know that there are a number of events going on around the region this weekend, and if you're planning to travel in and out of the region on Sunday, we strongly advise that you keep up to date with the forecast, because it may be advisable to get on the roads earlier than perhaps you had planned, and check the latest flight information with your travel provider if you're flying in or out of Auckland. And just finally, we recognise that the preparation for Cyclone Gabrielle is happening in the midst of the clean-up from last month's storm. Volunteer and community groups are going to be out in force again this weekend, helping with the big Auckland clean-up. That includes the ARC Collective in Puketapapa, Mount Roskill, where council staff have been partnering with volunteers this week to knock on doors to find out what help people need. For those clearing up, whether it's your property or as volunteers, we have important health and safety messages, which really is again to remember that those materials you're clearing could have come into contact with waste material. So remember to dress appropriately. This means gloves, covered footwear, masks, and of course exercising really good hygiene after handling any materials, so washing thoroughly. Please be careful and keep safe, particularly also if you see machinery working in and around your streets. Just remember to stay clear of equipment while it's in use, because some of our trucks and heavy equipment may not be able to see you as easily as you can see them. And just to close off today, I'd like to thank all Aucklanders for your work in preparing for Cyclone Gabrielle. It's certainly not what we were all hoping for, I think. But please continue to get ready, look out for one another, follow our Auckland Emergency Management channels for up-to-date information, and take care. Ngā mihi nui. Thanks, everybody.
Actually, just a question on sandbags. You say you have a limited supply. Just how much is that? We know that they're really in high demand right now, and a lot of residents worry that they can't get their hands on them.
Look, I don't have the specific number in front of me, but it is in the order of thousands. But I think that the advice that we give again is to really look at whether sandbagging is the right solution for your property. There are the ability for people to get those, both the sand and the bags through hardware supply stores, but people can, if they need to, go to one of those pickup sites that I mentioned, and those details will be on our website.
Just on that, Rachel, and I suppose in relation to preparedness, you only have to walk out and let's say West Auckland, where we were today, and a lot of concern about things like clearing of culverts, clearing of curbside. How much of that have you been doing? Do you have the resource to cover the whole city in that respect?
Look, that's absolutely been a priority for our Healthy Waters team. We've had an order of close to 300 staff and contractors out on the ground over this past week, obviously focusing in knowing that this weather is coming into priority sites and hotspots. So that work is definitely happening, both the maintenance and the clearing of any blockages that are able to be accessed. But again, would ask that Aucklanders also help out. Things like your curb and channels outside your properties, making sure that they're clear, will all help play its part.
What's your advice for homeless people as the cyclone approaches?
Look, as it always would be, there are a range of different community service providers that help with people in those situations, and we would encourage people to connect in with those social services and make sure that they can stay safe.
This might be one for Ian potentially, but out west again, issues where there's been damage to public land, compromising or in many cases destroying things like access to private property. What's the advice for residents where the damage is to public land but it's affecting things like their access, whether it be their house or a driveway, for example? Obviously, if it's residential land, it's under EQC. If not, they effectively have to wait for the council if it's on a public road reserve, for example.
Well, I think the first thing is just making sure that the way that they're accessing and getting egress to their property is safe. think that's the most important thing at the moment. I think conversations will continue with our parks and reserves teams with those affected individuals, and a remediation will be achieved in due course.
You say remediation will be achieved. You drive out west, particularly those roads sort of down around Manukau Harbour. The slips are fairly significant, to say the least. Just a sort of general question around the future of some of these suburbs, and what do you see that being? Is it going to be possible to remediate in every case?
So it's a really big question. So clearly there's a change, and well, we haven't seen an event like this or a sequence like this in probably 100 years, I believe. So I guess we're in new territory, and I guess there's a lot of things going on in the country at the moment where people are looking at the way we used to do things in the past and actually adapting and changing. And I guess that'll continue.
Yeah, I could probably just, do you want me to cover off just a part of that? So just in relation to the access question, I guess the only other additional comment I would make is that, some of those situations are very case specific. Not all public land is the same classification or land status as each other. So working those details through, as Ian said, really needs to be dealt with on a case by case basis. Property owners working with their insurers, connecting in with us where they need to have a conversation about access is the first thing that we would be advising. But it's difficult to give a blanket response to something that is actually quite a complex picture. In terms of sort of just the scale of the event, as Ian touched on, significant event. We know that there has been substantial damage to a number of properties. We've got some very large slips. Some of those are not going to be able to be remediated anytime soon. And so very much the next phase beyond our initial response is working through our recovery plan, and the recovery plan looks to the future and what we might need to do differently, or what the steps we need to take are to do that remedial work.
Rachel, what's the advice for people living on the coast, living by cliffs, on cliffs? Is it safe for them to stay in their homes?
As Ian said, our general advice is that people need to stay attuned to the conditions around their properties, and certainly people that are in properties where there has been a slip or are near to a slip should certainly be vigilant about any changes in the conditions around their property. And as we've talked about, for both well-being and safety, over the immediate period of the storm event and perhaps 6 to 12 hours afterwards, it really is our advice that people may be more comfortable or advised to stay perhaps somewhere elsewhere that evening.
Is the council prepared to call for an evacuation if it's required?
Certainly, and I did mention that we have extended the local state of emergency declaration. One of the things that does is it gives us the powers to enforce, or gives us the ability to enable the New Zealand Police to exercise evacuations if that is required.
Two questions. What's the current advice for schools, and when it comes to infrastructure around the city, what are your key concerns?
So, we are, of course, providing advice to the schools in terms of the information that we hold on the predicted event, and they will, of course, also be looking at what is coming out through our colleagues at Met Service. Ultimately, it will be for the schools to make their decision about what arrangements they take in terms of any school closures or not, but we will work with them to promote any messaging that they need to be put out to the public. Again, we just encourage people to connect in or keep an eye on the usual school channels that they would have for getting their information about their school arrangements.
And key pieces of infrastructure in terms of the current storm, what areas are you worried about?
Well, I think we've talked about this event having that additional complication of potentially high winds or high winds. I think not potentially. I think what Georgina is saying, there will be wind, and it's probably just a case of how strong that gets to. So those winds on top of sodden soil, have the potential to take out power at a scale that perhaps we didn't see in the previous event. We've also got that potential for coastal surge. So coastal erosion is something that we didn't see previously. But, again, the range of services that we provide, depending on the scale of this, could have some level of impact.
Obviously, at least on the surface, we appear to be better prepared this time. Certainly emergency services here today and a sort of a wider array of people. Why the difference in that respect this time as opposed to 2 weekends ago?
I think that's simple. I think it's that we've got the ability to see this system coming in a way that we didn't the other. Georgina,
I was gonna say, yeah,
yes, she might like to make a comment on that as the forecaster.
So it's a matter of scale, actually. Cyclones, it's over the Coral Sea. It's a long, long, long way away. So we're obviously looking at track quite carefully at the moment for different parts of the country and regions and what the impacts might be. With thunderstorms, which were the troublemaker on the Friday the 27th, they have a lifetime of about an hour and a half. They're very small, so one suburb can be getting nuked in a K away, so Greyland versus Ponsonby completely fine. So thunderstorms are more difficult to forecast because they're small in time and space, and cyclones, this is a big cyclone, so the bigger the beast, in some ways the easier to forecast.
Speaking of scale, can you just put it in perspective for Auckland is, how much rainfall are we expecting from this particular event compared to what we had a fortnight ago? Will we see flooding on the same scale?
I'd like to answer that question on Sunday when we have a better estimate of track and how close to Auckland, because it's going to matter for Auckland. At this stage, be prepared, plan for the worst, hope for the best. Thank you.
I'll take one more question and then I might need to just wrap it up there because I've got another commitment that we need to, or some of us need to get to. Any other last question?
At what point should people know when to evacuate their homes? Like, what's a good indication that it's the right time to leave?
Well, certainly we will be providing more advice on that on Sunday as we have more information about just how the event is tracking and where we expect those most severe impacts to be. Of course, the types of things people should generally be looking for is if there are signs of any kind of land movement, if people are seeing water coming out of the ground that is sort of a muddy colour and not previously seen, if there is floodwaters rising or surface waters rising anywhere around properties, those are the sorts of things, of course, we would be expecting people to look to move out, but we will provide more information around impacts and guidance on Sunday once we've got that updated forecast. Thank you, everybody.